what are the steps in an ISO 9001 implementation project, and what are the main difficulties during this process. Okay, so before I begin, I would like to give you a recommendation, and it is that in order to succeed in the implementation of the standard, it is necessary to obtain the necessary knowledge, not only to implement the requirements of the standard, but also to carry out the planning of the implementation in a correct way. So today we'll discuss the following topics. The first one will be what are the main pitfalls in an implementation project, how you can speed up an implementation project. Then we will talk about how can you prepare yourself and your organization for the implementation. Next, we will talk about the steps to consider during ISO 9001 implementation. And finally, we will go over the biggest challenges in ISO 9001 implementation. So before I continue, I will show you the poll. In this poll, the question is, what would you like this webinar to focus on? Which topics you will find the most interesting? So I will give you some seconds to answer this poll. Okay, so since most of you have voted, we have here the results. So you are interested mainly in the biggest challenges in ISO 9001 implementation, followed by the steps in ISO 9001 implementation, pitfalls in the implementation project, then preparing for the implementation, and finally how to speed up the implementation. Okay, so I will try to focus on the topics that you are most interested in, but obviously I will cover all of them. Great, so let's continue. So actually I have a question right now. So this question is from Kat. So the question is that we are a design and manufacturing company. We plan to leave accounting and IT outside the scope of the certification, as they provide clear services and are continually controlled by being in the same office. Is that acceptable? Well, actually, I had a question from a client today, very similar. Kat, it was about other area or scope. And I have to say that you need to consider if this is worth for you, since some processes that are relevant for your company will need to be included in the management system, in the scope of the management system. Why? Because the scope of the management system needs to be relevant, needs to, so the purpose of implementing a management system is to improve the processes. And if the processes involved are relevant for your company and you want to certify the whole company, then you will need to include these parts in the scope of the certification. Having said this, if these processes are not so relevant, are not the main ones, as you are saying, you're a design and manufacturing company, I see that maybe these are not the most relevant processes in your company, then you can leave outside of the scope these processes. But think it twice, okay, to leave these processes out of the scope, okay? If, for example, they are providing clear services, continually controlled, and they are following actually some procedures, probably they are going to be easy to integrate in the management system. So I will recommend you to include it. Okay, but of course, if they are not relevant, you can actually leave them out of the scope. Okay, so let's continue, or let's start with the pitfalls of the implementation project. So let's talk about the lack of commitment first, okay? So lack of commitment means lack of top management support, means lack of time to demonstrate what is important, okay? So basically, top management must provide the necessary resources to make sure that the implementation is successful, but also to make sure that the employees of the company are aware of the importance of their involvement of this kind of project. So let's say that any subordinate is the greatest scholar of his boss or her boss behavior. Okay, so what is important is not what top management says and proclaims, but what his or her agenda says. Another pitfall will be proceeding without a detailed plan. So implementing a project without a detailed plan, it's another important and relevant pitfall. So you should have a plan. Okay, a plan basically is essential to maintain and manage our pace and minimize surprises like delays, like not meeting the deadlines, etc. Actually, we have a project plan in our website that you can download for free. Another pitfall will be not meeting deadlines. Is actually very related to the previous one. So not establishing document templates early on in the project will be the next one. This conveys an image of lack of planning, a lack of organization, and generates mistrust in the quality of your work, and will later lead to the loss of time to standardize what could have been achieved earlier. So that's why a procedure for the control of documents and records must be developed at the very beginning of the project. Then, not knowing the standard, following complex interpretations, and introducing too much bureaucracy will definitely bring problems to the implementation of the system. So make sure that you purchase the standard and also learn the different clauses and their meaning using different materials like some blog posts, some online courses. For example, we have some online courses that are totally for free. The Foundations course about ISO 9001 2015. Then not giving the right approach to the management review, making them ineffective since the first one. Okay, so again, this is a proof of top management's commitment. So make sure that top management is involved in the project for real. Using KPIs, the key performance indicators, is going to help you to get this objective information and to get and to be able to perform this analysis to obtain the inputs for the management review. So how can you speed up the implementation? So basically, the first one will be considering external help. Okay, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so the design and documentation of the QMS is a very important part of the implementation. So basically here, it is necessary to make a decision regarding external help, such as something similar to what Advisora offers, or maybe hiring an external consultant, etc. For example, you can purchase a toolkit or some online toolkit, online tool that is going to help you during the implementation process of the standard. Also, you can do on your own with your own employees, but you need to consider that they will need to receive the knowledge, they will need to have the experience, and so on. Then avoid having just one person for the entire project. So how do you avoid this? Considering a project team, okay, that can handle the different parts of the project. So you have to make sure that the right people are involved and that most of the relevant people are the busiest in the company. Okay, this is why it is really difficult to have them full time in the implementation process, and it is important to inform them in advance when they will need, when they will be needed. Sorry, and to what extent. Okay, to schedule these meetings and to make the most of them. In this way, the production manager, the sales manager, and etc. will be available for the implementation of the standard. Then, of course, you can apply online solutions for task and document management. You can consider using these online solutions for tasks, for document management, as I'm saying. And in addition, the implementation team must be used to develop the documents. However, the application of some templates will always help expedite the documentation project. This is simply because you will not have to deal with technicalities or some kind of, let's say, tedious part of the implementation, and you can focus on running and updating and aligning your system with the ISO 9001 standard. Then, of course, we are going to talk about how to prepare for the implementation. So first of all, you can conduct a gap analysis. Okay, this gap analysis is going to help you to compare your current system to the requirements of the standard. Okay, so this will help you to determine what is already in place and what needs to be implemented. From this, you can prepare a task list for each of the sections of the standard. You can also, when preparing the implementation plan, as in this project, the first step will be performing a gap analysis, as I mentioned earlier. So the gap analysis, sorry, the gap analysis is basically the same as internal audit in the sense that the requirements of the standard are taken and an audit is carried out in the company according to those requirements. In this way, it will be possible that the company already complies with some requirements of the standard, and we will know what needs to be done to achieve all compliance with the management system. So according to these results of the gap analysis, the project plan can be developed. In this project plan, it will be necessary to define what needs to be done, what documents have to be created, who will create these documents, what are the deadlines, etc. Okay. It is also positive to include additional information in the project, such as who is the sponsor of the project and things like this. This will, of course, depend on the size of the organization, but also the time available for the project. So if, let's say, a longer period of time is available, then more people can be involved. And in this way, it will be carried out more effectively and definitely faster. Also, proceeding without a plan tend to run the project indefinitely without showing, let's say, measurable project. So we can affirm that having a plan, you will have then specific deadlines to meet. Okay, so you can show progress as you meet the deadlines and take action if you are not meeting these deadlines. Not having this ISO steering team approve and support the plan. So this ISO steering team will be watching the timeline, coordinating and implementing the plan. Sorry. So they should have an input and approval of the plan, or better yet, prepare the plan. So as I mentioned before, it will be necessary to assign responsibilities. So you will have to define who will write certain procedures, who will carry out the satisfaction surveys, who will evaluate the suppliers, who will perform the intended audit, and so on. And then finally, get the top management support to assign the necessary resources to the project. So let's say the last part of the planning process, but not least, is the allocation of resources, because without these resources, it is definitely not possible to finish the project on time. So in the implementation of the ISO, the main resources we can affirm that are people. So it will be necessary to find the free time that comes from other activities so that the employees can decide on the implementation. So the resources can also, of course, be the knowledge base or the place where the information is obtained, and even some external help during the implementation process. Therefore, the standard, let's say, does not require introducing new technologies or things like that, but basically the requirements are organizational. Okay, so this way you will not need an extra expense for this project. So I have a question from Nahid. So in other ISO HLS, all ISO mandatory documents are quite same. How to merge these three standards, 9001, 45,001, 45,001, I guess you are saying 14,001, in duplication the documents point of view and fulfill the external audit requirements. Well, actually we have, I delivered a webinar recently on how to integrate the standards. So nowadays, you will do, we have this high level structure. Okay, so the clauses are shared. So there are a few differences between, let's say, for example, ISO 14001 and 9001, okay, such as, for example, clause 4, context of the organization, interested parties. So you can use the same procedures to let's say fulfill the same requirements. Obviously you will have different approaches because obviously 9001 is quality, 14001 is the protection of the environment, and so on. But of course you can audit these requirements at the same time since the clauses are shared. The main differences are in clause 8 that are referred to operations. But I invite you, of course, to download this free webinar that we have online, and I delivered recently, or to join the next webinar that we will have about the integration of the systems. But basically, the way to merge these systems is now much easier since we have same clauses for same requirements, just few different and obviously different approaches, and you will be able to merge these requirements during the internal audit as well. So another question from Nahid, would you please share the mandatory documents and records to do the gap analysis, and what is the order non-mandatory? Okay, so we have an article about this list of mandatory documents that you can see in our website. You can just type list of mandatory documents and the etc. for 9001, and you will see this list of documents because there are several voluntary and mandatory documents. Also, we have this gap analysis tool for free in our website. So I invite you to visit our website, and then it will be much easier for you to understand this gap analysis. But basically, this gap analysis will show you which requirements are you actually complying with and which requirements you need to comply with. Usually, when it's very structured company with a lot of procedures and so on, some of the requirements will be fulfilled, especially those related to operations. However, some of them that are specific requirements for ISO 9001, such as the context of the organization, risks and opportunities, and so on, you will need to, let's say, start from scratch if you haven't already implemented the previous version of the standard. Great. So let's continue with the steps in ISO 9001 implementation. So basically the first step will be to get management support, okay? We've talked about getting this management support in the previous slides, but basically what you have to do is speak their language and see the world from their point of view. So what you have to consider is the strategic orientation and challenges, and this will be critical, okay? So what happens is that without the support of management, of the top management, your implementation of ISO 9001 will almost certainly fail. So plan your sales pitch well to convince your top management that ISO 9001 is a good idea and show, of course, the benefits of its implementation. Then define the context of the organization. What is the environment? You will need to ask yourself, what is environment, the landscape where the organization is immersed? What are, of course, the internal issues that are relevant for the organization, but also what is the ecosystem of your interested parties that should be considered? In addition, consider what risks and opportunities. And one way to, let's say, cover this requirement will be to use a SWOT analysis as the simplest approach for this step, okay? You can organize a meeting with the relevant people of your organization, and perform this SWOT analysis where you will look at the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And actually, the results are going to help you later on when you will have to evaluate the risks and opportunities, define them, evaluate them, and address them. So at this point, I would like to show you our procedure for defining the context of the organization and interested parties. So this procedure, I have to say that it's not something, let's say, mandatory. Okay, this is a voluntary procedure. So basically, this is how it looks, our procedures, generally speaking, okay, in Advisor. So you will see lots of comments on the right side of the document with lots of links to materials, to free materials in our website, such as, of course, articles, but also other kind of materials such as white papers or online courses that are for free. Also, the comments will help you to complete this document, okay, and understand the requirements of the standard. This document is already fulfilled or completed in 80%, so you don't have to, let's say, deal with any kind of technicalities, any kind of complex terminology that you will find maybe in the ISO standard, right? So, yeah, basically what you have to do is to just adapt to your own situation. So you will see here the first page, the second page that will be change history, table of contents, and then we will start with the core of this document. That will be the proposed scope and users, the reference documents, and then we will start with the context of the organization, the internal context of the organization. You can see that we have a comment here to adapt to your own situation. Then the external context, we have separated or split the external context into immediate environment and general environment, but you don't need to do this. It's just our advice. And we have the identification of interest parties. As you can see here, you just need to enter the job title, the frequency, for example, of conducting this identification. Finally, considering the context of the organization, and at the end you can see this table that is about managing records kept on the basis of this document. That will be the list of interested parties, the conformance evaluation record, and finally the scope of the management system. Okay, so these let's say records will come along with this procedure. As I said, again, this procedure is not something mandatory, but will help you to comply systematically with this requirement of the standard. So I have a couple of questions. For example, from Maritza Sayas, for only consulting firms, can design control be excluded? Well, let's say design and development, okay, can be excluded if you are not, of course, performing this type of process in your company. For consulting firms, it depends. For example, since I am a consultant, for example, when I'm delivering any type of, let's say, training, I have to design the training. Okay, unless I receive all the requirements of the training, and I'm not designing the type of training, I won't incorporate, let's say, design and development in my activity. Okay, but unless I'm pretty sure that this design and development is not part of my processes, I will need to include this design and development process in the scope. Okay, if I want to cover obviously the whole organization processes. Okay, so you will need to look at your processes, your activities, and probably design is part of your processes. Some people, I would say that you're very scared about design and development for certain activities, and sometimes it's not that difficult. Okay, you just need to adapt to your own situation, your own organization, and your own processes. And if your design and development is not that complex, okay, then you won't need to worry too much. So I have another question from Temiloluwa. Sorry if I didn't pronounce well your name. So if a company is already certified, what are the next steps for compliance and continuity? Okay, so if you are already certified, you need to maintain the system. And actually, this is the most important step, okay? Or the core of the management system, because it's when you have to maintain the processes and when you need to prove in the next years that you are complying with the requirements of the standard. So you will pass the surveillance audit that you will need to pass every year. Okay, so basically we'll be running the processes, the procedures, keeping the records, and so on. Okay, and making the changes necessary to make. Okay, and then of course perform the internal audits every year and these kind of things, and reviewing the system. Okay, let's continue with our presentation. Okay, so the next step will be to define the scope of the QMS. So the relevant scope of the QMS is management, not a technical decision. So defining the scope of your QMS will help to ensure you know the limits of what needs to be done, so you do not include areas of your business that might not have an effect on your system. Okay, so the key tool to define the scope is a quality policy, which will be the first document that you will need to create for the QMS as well as for the context of the organization. Then the next step will be define the processes and procedures. So you will need to consider what procedures constitute your QMS, how do they interact, what procedures and instructions are needed, and you will need to define these, these processes and procedures. This will include, for example, the mandatory procedures, the mandatory documents defined by the ISO standard, but also any additional processes and procedures required for your company to ensure consistent and adequate results with respect to quality. The key here is to define all the processes in your company and look at how they interact within your organization. So it is in these interactions that problems can occur. The next step will be to implement processes and procedures, okay? And sometimes there are no changes in the way of working, okay? Sometimes there is a need to make changes because maybe all practices were not according to ISO 9001, or because there were no all practices about something required by ISO 9001, for example, or the review of quality control, and things like that, or maybe customer satisfaction, etc. So often these processes will already be in place at your company, and you will just need to adapt to ISO 9001 and document it adequately to ensure consistent result. Not all processes, I have to say here, need to be documented procedures, but it's important to decide which ones need to be in order to ensure compliant products and services. Of course, people need to be trained about the new practices and made aware about the quality policies and objectives and how they can impact on the QMA results and the product and service conformity. It is important that everyone in your organization know what you are doing with your QMS and how they fit into the equation. Okay, so employees should have training on what the ISO 9001 is, so that they are aware of why you are doing this, and as well as important training of any changes to the processes that they are involved in. After that, you will need to select a certification body. So you will need to consider what kind of criteria could be relevant for your situation and ask them the requirements. This actually can be a very important step in how effective your implementation is. So the certification body is a company that will ultimately come into audit your QMS and decide if it is complying with ISO 9001 requirements, as well as whether it is effective and you are improving the management system. So it is best to interview several certification bodies. I would say 3 should be enough to decide which is the right one for your own needs and your own company. Then, of course, operate the QMS, measure the system, generate historic data, and improve. So this is when you will collect the records that will be required in audits to show that your processes actually meet the requirements set out for them, that they are effective, and that improvements are being made in your QMS as needed. Okay, so certification bodies need this to happen over a certain length of time, which they will identify in order to ensure that the system is mature enough to show compliance. Okay, so I have a question from Marisa. Can the context just be a section of the QM? I don't really, I guess the quality manual. Yes, actually it can be, so you can insert in your quality manual as a part of it. And actually the quality manual is no longer mandatory. So you can decide just having this to identify the context of the organization or the identification and determining the context of the organization to insert in the quality manual. Actually, the quality manual, or sorry, the context of the organization is not a mandatory document, okay? But obviously it's much better if you have it, let's say in a document, because it's going to help you to show evidence that you have determined the context of the organization. So this is something that you need to know. Excellent. So I have a question from Muhammad Osama. So do you have any questionnaire or similar document for ensuring and improving the system of an organization which is already implementing ISO standards? Um, so actually, I don't really understand your question, but however, for example, after the management review, okay, you will need to improve the system. So the top management will need to evaluate every input and every output to be able to improve your management system. Mm? So this is a very important process to analyze if, for example, the objectives have been fulfilled. If they haven't been fulfilled, if they haven't reached, achieved, then you will need to change them. You will need to improve them as well as other parts of your management system. Okay, so I would say that the most important part for, let's say, improving your system will be the results of the management review. Okay, and of course, as well as the internal audit. Okay, so the questionnaire of the internal audit will help you to identify if you are actually fulfilling the requirements of the standard, but also I would say that the management review will help you a lot to improve the system. Okay, let's continue with the steps. So the next step will be conducting these internal audits. Okay, so perform internal audits and do the follow up. Okay, before the certification audit comes in to audit your system. Okay, so this let's say internal audit will give you a chance to make sure that the processes are doing what you had planned. Okay, you will also have a chance to implement the necessary corrective actions to fix any problems that you will find during these internal audits. So actually, we have an online training, actually for free, that is a ISO 9001 2015 internal auditor course that I recommend you to have a look. Okay. The next step will be conducting this management review that I was talking about, just as an important step, okay, for the implementation of ISO 9001. Um, and it is very important, as I was saying before, because it will help you to continue to maintain the system and to improve the system. Okay, so basically, the management during this management review will need to review specific data from the activities of the processes of your QMS in order to ensure that the processes have been adequate and they had the necessary resources to be effective and to be able to improve. Then you will need to take, of course, the corrective actions. Okay, so this is the step where you will need to find the root cause of any problems found during the measurements, during the internal audits and management review, and take action to correct this root cause. Okay, this is the key step towards improvement, which is a main focus of having in an ISO 9001 QMS. And finally, of course, certify the QMS. Okay, so you will have two stages. Okay, let's say stage one of the certification audit, where your documentation will be reviewed by the certification body auditors. Okay, and then the stage two of the certification audit. Okay, and this is considered the main audit when the certification body auditors will review the records of that have been accumulated by operating your QMS processes, including your records of internal audits, management reviews, corrective actions, and so on. So from this review, we will take some days. The certification body, depending, of course, on the size of your organization, the certification body will issue a report detailing their findings and whether they have found your QMS to be effective and in compliance to the ISO 9001 requirements. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here. So Jaideep Ghosh, are turtle diagrams necessary for an ISO 9001 external audit? No, you don't have to develop turtle diagrams. Okay, this is a way to, let's say, know what are your processes and to, let's say, comply with the process approach. Okay, to learn about your processes and their interactions. Okay, you can just draw a process map that is going to help you as well. So you are free to decide how you are going to define which are your processes and how are their interactions. Okay, so Jainisha, can you tell us the difference between internal audit and management review? Well, actually, internal audit is performed before the management review. So during the internal audit, what we check, usually we use a checklist, okay? If the management review is actually, sorry, the management system is compliant with the requirements of the standard, okay? Then afterwards, we will see if there are non-conformities related to this non-compliance of the requirements of the management system, and we will need to take the necessary corrections or corrective actions, okay? After that, we will need to, let's say, fix any problem, any non-conformity that we have found during these internal audits, and we will use these internal audits results as inputs for our management review, okay? Um, these internal audits won't be the only inputs that we will use for the management review. Okay, we will also use, for example, the objectives, and if we have achieved these objectives, why we haven't achieved them. We will have, for example, risks and opportunities, and many other inputs that are related to the different processes in a management system. Okay, so this will be the main difference. So actually, we conduct internal audits and then we conduct the management review. I hope it is clearer now. Okay, another question from Maritza. Shall all the procedures be released at the time, or can they be released when completed and start creating records? So you can do whatever you want, okay? So you can write all the procedures that are not mandatory, are voluntary, and then start, let's say running the processes, or you can do the opposite. Okay, actually I would say that the opposite is more common. So people write the procedures and they are reviewed, they are approved, and you can start running the processes. Okay, so in this way you will be let's say saving time. Great, let's continue with the next slide. Is about the biggest challenges. So before I continue, I will show you another poll. Okay, in this poll, the question is, what do you think are the main challenges about implementing ISO 9001 2015? So I'm going to give you some seconds to answer this question. Okay, so these are the results of the sorry, of the poll. So most of you are interested in abandoning all practices, followed by getting the employees on board, getting management buy-in, that we have talked about this one, and then meeting the deadlines. Okay, so I will cover all of them. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left, but I will try to focus on the themes that you are most interested in. Great, so let's continue with our presentation. So the first and, let's say, perhaps the most important is the lack of commitment. Okay, so from this problem actually come the vast majority of the other issues. For example, you can have the commitment of the head of quality or the representative or the management representative, um, which both understand the requirements of the standard and the value that the standards brings to the company. However, it might happen that the rest of the employees and even the senior management are not so convinced, okay, and see the project as a lot of documents or even as an expense for the company in terms of staff training, hiring consultants, and the certification itself, etc. So this can be, or this can really affect the success of the implementation. So it is important to raise awareness in the, let's say, in the process, and try to explain why it's so relevant. Okay, um, so let's say, therefore, one of the biggest challenges is to face is to get this management acceptance, sorry, as well as get enough motivation from employees. I would say that um, you can prepare elevator speech if they are not convinced to implement the standard, and in an informal situation, and afterwards you will be able to present the project in a formal presentation to the management, showing which are the main benefits, and as I was talking during the presentation, talking their language in terms of let's say how they are going to save money, how they are going to increase the sales and so on. Okay, so you need to put on the shoes of the top management and do a presentation, as I was saying, talking their language. Okay. um, the most important thing is to raise also awareness of the implementation and emphasize how the project is going to benefit the company. And this way, also getting the employees on board. I really like to conduct this awareness session at the very beginning of the implementation. So they are going to be let's say engaged in the project. They know how they can be engaged in the project. Actually, this is going to benefit the management system because they will be part of, let's say, writing the procedures, writing work instructions. They know better than anyone, especially let's say in some processes, they know better than anyone how a process work, and they are going to use these documents. So it is important that they know how they can be part of this management system. And I would say that this awareness session at the very beginning is going to help them a lot to be engaged in the project. Also, they will learn that they are a part of the system. Okay, so I was actually conducting this week an internal audit, and they knew that they are an interested party. Okay, so they can ask for their needs and expectations. So this is very important that employees are engaged in the project and they know how they can um, participate in the project. They feel part of the project. Okay. um, then abandoning old practices. Okay, so let's say as for the bureaucratic burden, okay, the best way to deal with it is to assess the competence of people within the company. Okay, so if the employees are competent enough, you will not have to worry about writing procedures for everything, work instructions, etc. Okay, so it is always possible to keep the system simple and apply quality plans as a way to record and document the processes. So in this way, on a sheet, you will have all the necessary information to describe the processes, and so on. How can we convince this abandoning all practices? I really like to show, because sometimes they tell you, okay, if we've been working for, I don't know, several years, and this process or this procedure was perfectly working for us, why we need to change it? Then I really like to let's say select um, let's say mm, mm, one day or one practice that wasn't that good, okay, and to show how they can improve that practice or that non-conformity or that issue that they had. Okay, so let's say comparing what happened and or what went wrong and how they can improve that process in order to be corrected, in order to have maybe less work, in order to have less issues. Okay, so selecting an issue that they had in the past is going to help them to understand how can they improve a process, and also showing the benefits of, let's say, maybe a process is going to be faster. They are going to find certain things easier to do. They are going to invest less time doing certain tasks. Okay, this way you are showing them in practice how abandoning all practice is going to benefit them. And then finally, meeting deadlines. Okay, how um, to overcome these deadlines. Um, of course, writing this project plan is going to help you a lot, tracking and monitoring the staff, the systems, the documents, and organizing regular meetings during the implementation project. It also helps greatly, as I mentioned earlier, to have some maybe online solutions for tax management or project management. And finally, remember that failing to plan means planning to fail. Okay, so of course, writing a project plan with all the documents, all the responsibilities, deadlines, how you are going to monitor everything, scheduling these meetings is going to help you a lot to implement effectively ISO 9001. So I will we will go over the Q&A session now, although we don't have actually the time is over, but I will answer a couple of questions before we leave. So I have a question here from okay, SWOT analysis. This is a question from, let's see, Nahid. Is SWOT analysis fulfill the clause 4.1 and 4.2 to determine the context of the organization as long it comes in 3 ISO 9001, 45,001, 14,001? Yes, actually, as I said before, the context of the organization is not a mandatory document, so you can decide how to let's say to demonstrate that you are fulfilling this requirement. Okay, so if you decide to, let's say, organize a meeting where you will determine with the relevant people of your organization the context of the organization through conducting this SWOT analysis, it should be perfectly fine. The only thing, well, we're not during this webinar, we are just talking about 9001, but if you want to incorporate any other standard, of course, it's a different approach. Just have this in mind when considering the internal and external issues, okay? But it should be enough to prove that you have fulfilled the requirements of determining the context of the organization, since there is no mandatory document associated to the context of the organization. I have a question from Anthony here. How do we test the management system effectiveness? Okay, so I would say that measurements that are usually done are related to the KPIs, okay, the key performance indicators. These are going to help you to understand, to measure if you have achieved the objectives that you have already planned, okay? And that's why it's so important that the objectives are measurable, okay, that are time-based as well, okay, because you will need to analyze, okay, if these let's say objectives have been achieved. Yeah, and then how you also measure the effectiveness once you have the results from the analysis done with the KPIs, okay, to measure if the objectives have been achieved. You will use this as an input for the management review, and during the management review you will see how effective the processes implemented in your company have been effective, whether they have been effective or not. So basically during the management review is where you will test the effectiveness of your own management system, and you will need to do the necessary changes, the necessary improvements, and so on. I have a question from him here. So can you implement ISO standards in an organization below 10 employees? Of course, actually, any kind of company, any size, any type of industry can implement any ISO standard. So ISO standards, you will see that, of course, there are requirements that need to be fulfilled, but they don't tell you how to do. And you can even implement in any from very large companies to any very small company. Okay, so yeah, definitely you can implement ISO standard in any kind of organization and any size. um, So I have a question from Dietmar here. How do you best decide on KPIs that are relevant for the business quality? Okay, so the KPIs need to be related to the objectives of the quality objectives, okay? So since the quality objectives need to be measurable, okay, you will need to see how you are going to measure if you have achieved these objectives, okay? So let's say that your objective is to ensure that you achieve, I'm thinking about achieve, let's say, and score a media a score media of 4/5 in the satisfaction service. Okay. Then okay, you can measure it just with the service that you have delivered to your clients. Okay, and you will be able to measure that. Okay, this is a very simple way. But how you best decide is definitely looking at your objectives. Okay, how since your objectives need to be measurable, how you are going to measure these objectives. Okay. Okay. So I have a question here about Antonio's. Is what about process owners? Okay, I don't know what you want to meet. What about process owners? I guess if how are they important to this? Okay, so the process owners need to be involved, or I would say they need to know the procedure. So it is very important, or I would say relevant. It is of course not mandatory that they are involved in the procedures. Okay, so this way. You will know better how a process work and how to improve this process. Okay, but also you are going to use this procedure for the process. So I would say to be engaged in the implementation of the system, to be part of the team of the implementation of the QMS will be very positive in order to be more effective. Okay, good. So our time is up. Okay, so I'm sorry there was no time to answer all your questions, but the purpose of this webinar was to give you a general overview of the main steps, okay, of the implementation of the QMS. Okay, however, you can send me any question that you may have about ISO 9001 to my email that I'm going to write down in the chat box right now. Okay. And you will receive and you will receive all the necessary links. I'm not able, sorry, to write in the chat box, but you will receive in the email that you will receive after this presentation. You will receive my email, so you can write me anything that you want and any questions. So as I mentioned before, this 1-hour webinar was intended to give you to go into details of this overview of the steps of the implementation of the standard. So please take a look at our workshops, okay, our articles, sorry, our materials such as white papers and diagrams and even other webinars, okay. You can also download this presentation deck from our website, from this go to webinar control panel, and we'll send you an email with all the necessary link. Finally, right after this webinar, you'll see a short survey. So I will kindly ask you to spend just a couple of minutes to fill it in. Okay, that will be all for today. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope you have enjoyed and you have learned during this webinar. Have a very nice day. Bye.